My name is Lena Hart. I'm 35, a graphic designer, and I live with my husband, Ethan, in a quiet suburban neighborhood in Austin, Texas. We have a small ranch-style house on a tree-lined street not far from Zilker Park. Visitors often comment on how idyllic it is, almost too perfect. A manicured front lawn with rose bushes, pristine white window frames, a house that looks like something out of a real estate magazine. But behind the facade, it's not as perfect as it seems. Ethan and I have been married for 16 years. We got married very young. I was 19, he was 22. Back then, I was convinced we were meant to be. He was my first serious boyfriend, my first love, my forever and always. Our wedding was a small ceremony in a local church in my hometown in rural Texas. All our relatives were there. I remember thinking, this is what happiness feels like, and it will last forever. The forever part has held up, at least on paper. In reality, it has often been different. Ethan works in the film industry, mostly as a production manager. He's constantly on the go, on location, long nights, receptions, meetings. It used to thrill me, his energy, his stories from the set, the glamorous names he mentioned. Over the years, however, I started to wonder more and more if that world was driving us apart. I'm much more of a homebody. As a graphic designer, I work from home a lot, often alone, immersed in layouts and campaigns for Austin-based agencies. We don't have children. At first, it was a conscious decision because we both wanted to focus on our careers. Later, when the time might have been right, it felt like the moment had passed. Sometimes I regret it, but sometimes I'm also relieved. Our marriage is a mix of closeness and distance. We still laugh, we share many habits, but something is missing. A sense of ease and unshakable trust, the kind I once imagined we'd have. That Saturday morning, I woke up earlier than Ethan. The sun cast bright stripes on the bedroom wall, and I lay still, listening to his quiet breathing. I wondered if he ever lay awake thinking about us. I eventually got up, put on my robe, and went to the kitchen. The smell of coffee, the hum of the machine, small rituals that grounded me. While I waited, I scrolled through my phone. A text from my best friend, Clara. "Hey, how's your movie star doing? Come to the farmer's market with me today. You need a distraction." She always called him a movie star, even though he wasn't one, only in the sense that he worked among them. Clara had often hinted that she didn't trust him. Too many pretty colleagues, too many nights away, she'd say. I'd always brushed it off. But that morning, with a fresh cup of coffee in my hand, I felt those doubts gnawing at me again. "Morning," I finally heard Ethan say from the hallway. He came into the kitchen groggy and wearing only his shorts and grabbed his phone first thing. "Morning," I replied, trying to sound normal. "Everything okay?" he asked, staring at his screen. "Yeah, everything's fine." I sipped my coffee, watching him over the rim of the cup. "Just have to check some emails real quick," Ethan mumbled. "New York was exhausting. Everything always piles up." "Of course," I said. But inside I was thinking, always that phone, always that work. He noticed my tone and looked up. "What?" "Nothing." "Lena," he sighed, "we've been over this. I'm not doing this to ignore you. It's my job." I forced a smile. "I know, I'm just going to clean the bathroom real quick." "Cleaning again?" He laughed briefly, shaking his head. "You're crazy. Saturday morning and you want to scrub tile? Someone has to do it. Let's just have breakfast together instead." "In a minute." I started cleaning the bathroom mechanically, as I always did. The motions were automatic. Spray, wipe, rinse. And then I saw it. A blonde hair in our shower. Thin, light. Not mine, not his. In that moment, everything I had only vaguely felt before, mistrust, uncertainty, distance, suddenly became real. A piece of evidence, small and inconspicuous, but sharp as a knife. I stared at the hair in my hand as if I had found proof of a crime. Thin, almost translucent in the light, but definitely blonde. My breathing quickened. I have black hair. Ethan has black hair. We live alone. I felt hot under my rubber gloves. I held the hair up, looked at it one more time, then quickly threw it in the trash can, as if I could erase it from my mind too. but the image was seared into my brain. "Lena?" Ethan's voice called from the kitchen. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I called back, too quickly, too high-pitched. A few seconds later, he appeared in the doorway, coffee cup in hand, hair messy, still sleepy. "You seem off." I forced myself to appear calm. "I'm fine, just doing a quick clean." He took a step closer. "You're pale. Don't you want to sit down instead?" I forced a smile. "No, it's okay. I'll be done in a minute." Ethan steadied me, then raised an eyebrow. "Okay, but please don't stress yourself out with cleaning so much. You really overdo it sometimes." "It just has to be done," I replied, wiping the shower wall right where the blonde hair had been stuck moments ago. He placed his cup on the edge of the sink and put a hand on my shoulder. "Babe, it's the weekend. Come on, let's have breakfast." I looked at him. There was something warm and familiar in his dark eyes, but at the same time, there was that distance that had been making me so uneasy in recent months. "In a minute," I mumbled. "I'll be done in a second." At the breakfast table, the mood was strange. Ethan cracked eggs, scrambling them in the pan as if everything was normal. I sat with my coffee cup, watching his every move, the ease with which he moved, as if there was nothing to hide. "So," he began as he put the pan on the table, "I thought we could go for a walk in Zilker Park today. Just the two of us, unwind for a bit." "Sounds great," I said automatically, but my thoughts immediately drifted. Just the two of us, or had someone else recently been here? I reached for the salt shaker, then put it back down. My hands were trembling slightly. Ethan noticed. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, of course." He put his fork down. "You seem tense. Is something wrong?" I took a deep breath. Now or never, I thought. But how do you say something like that? "Hey, I just found a blonde hair in our shower. Can you explain that?" Instead, I asked, "Hey, did you take a shower yesterday evening after I had already gone to bed?" He blinked, looking confused. "Yeah, why?" "No reason," I said quickly, trying to sound casual. "It just occurred to me that the bathroom was so humid this morning." "Huh?" He picked up his fork again, chewing. "Yeah, it was late. I was sweaty from the drive back from New York." I nodded, staring at my scrambled eggs, barely eating. After a while, I asked, "And how was New York?" "Stressful as always," he replied, shrugging. "Long days, chaotic crew, but at least the premiere was well attended. The press was there too." "Did you see any colleagues you already knew?" I asked, trying to sound overly casual. He laughed quietly. "Colleagues? Why are you asking like that?" "Just curious." "Yeah, sure. You run into people. The business is small. Why?" I took a sip of coffee. My heart was pounding. "Nothing." He put his fork down, looking searchingly at me. "Lena, if something is on your mind, just say it. We've been married for 16 years. I can tell when something is bothering you." I forced a smile. "I'm fine, really." He studied me for another moment, then slowly nodded. "All right, but you know you can talk to me about anything." "Can I?" I thought. After breakfast, Ethan cleared the plates. I stayed at the table, staring into space. The blonde hair wouldn't leave me alone. The longer I thought about it, the less I could dismiss it as a coincidence. Images formed in my head. Another woman in our shower, laughing as Ethan handed her my shampoo. Blonde, confident, a stranger. My throat tightened. As Ethan loaded the dishwasher, he glanced at me. "You look like your mind is a million miles away." I forced a calm tone. "Just have a lot on my mind. Work, Clara, all kinds of things." He nodded, accepting it, but I knew from that moment on I would start looking more closely. The days after finding the blonde hair felt strange, as if the world had shifted just a tiny bit and everything was suddenly off kilter. On the surface, our daily routine stayed the same. Ethan worked a lot, made phone calls, wrote emails, left for appointments. In the evenings, we sat together at the table, ate, and talked about nothing important. But for me, every sentence, every movement, every little gesture had taken on a new meaning. I noticed that he had recently started placing his phone face down on the table. Before, it used to lie face up, and I could see when a message came in. Now it remained hidden. I noticed he stayed in the bathroom longer in the evenings. The water would run, the fan would hum. Sometimes I heard him humming. Before, I hadn't cared. Now I wondered who he was showering for so wholeheartedly when I was already in my pajamas. I noticed he was shaving more often, even on days when he was supposedly just doing office work. All small things, maybe coincidences, maybe not. At night, I lay awake beside him. He slept deeply, his breathing steady, sometimes accompanied by a soft snore. I stared into the darkness and wondered if I was going crazy, if I was looking for something that wasn't there, or if, on the contrary, I had been looking away for far too long. 2 days later, I texted Clara. I didn't really want to tell her anything, but it was burning a hole in my chest. Time for coffee? I need a distraction. She replied immediately. Always. Pike Place Market, 4 p.m. We met at the Daily Grind Cafe. It was crowded as usual. The smell of fresh pastries hung in the air, tourists lining up at the counter. Clara was already sitting by the window, blonde, energetic as always. "There you are," she said as I sat down. "You look tense." I waved her off, forcing a smile. "Too much work." "Work," she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "Or too much Ethan?" "Nothing," I said quickly, taking a sip of my cappuccino. "All right," she said after a moment. "I don't have to tell me, but you know I can see it in your face." I stared into my cup, stirring the foam with my spoon. "It's nothing concrete, just little things." "Little things," she echoed. I nodded. "You know when you suddenly start noticing things you never paid attention to before? A different perfume, coming home late, a phone lying face down on the table?" She said nothing, but I felt her gaze on me. "Maybe I'm just imagining it," I continued, my voice quieter. "Maybe I'm seeing ghosts." Clara took a sip of her coffee and slowly set the cup down. "Ghosts are not usually ghosts," she murmured. "Sometimes it's just what's been in the room the whole time." I looked up at her. "You mean—" She shrugged. "I'm not meaning anything. I'm just saying you should look closer." We sat in silence. Outside, crowds passed by with shopping bags, laughter, and a jumble of voices. I felt like I was behind a pane of glass, separated from what was normal. "You know him," Clara said finally, her voice softer. "You can tell when someone is different, when they suddenly have secrets. You're not stupid." I nodded, but the lump in my throat only grew bigger. On the way home, I walked through the narrow streets, the sounds of the city all around me, but inside it was quiet. Her words echoed in my head. You can tell when someone is different. And indeed, I started registering everything. How Ethan smelled of a different soap we had never bought, how he sometimes smiled absently when he looked at his phone, how he chose his clothes more carefully than before, even when he was just going to the office. I said nothing. I just collected every detail, every deviation. An invisible log was forming in my head. But the more I saw, the clearer it became. It was no longer just my imagination. Something was going on, and I had to find out what. It started with a small thing, so small that I almost overlooked it. My shampoo. I'd been using the same one for years, a thick, dark liquid with a herbal scent that always gave me a strange sense of stability. Ethan hated the smell. He had his own neutral body wash, always the same brand, always on his shelf. We had kept that unspoken division for years. My shelf, his shelf. Two small territories we never questioned. One evening, while I was showering, I noticed the bottle felt lighter. I shook it. The sloshing sound was unmistakable. At least a third of it was gone. I frowned. I had just bought it. At first, I tried to rationalize it. Maybe I had used more than I thought. Maybe I was imagining things. But the unease stayed with me. Over the next few days, I paid closer attention. I always put the bottle back in the exact same spat, subtly marking a faint line in the plastic with my fingernail. And after 3 days, it was clear. The shampoo was getting emptier without my help. A shiver ran down my spine. Ethan hated that smell. He had never touched it, not once, not in all these years. Why would he suddenly start using it now? I stood in the bathroom one morning, the bottle in my hand, staring at the dwindling contents. The fluorescent light reflected off the plastic. My heart pounded in my temples. Someone else had been here. She stood in my shower. She used my shampoo while I was maybe sitting in the living room or sleeping in our bed. The thought squeezed my throat. During the day, I tried not to let anything show. Ethan worked as usual, made calls, laughed at something someone said on the other end of the line, but I saw him differently now. Every time he walked past me, I smelled him, searching for a hint of my shampoo. There was none. He wasn't using it. So who was? That evening, Clara called me. "Feel like a glass of wine?" she asked. "I'm in town." I didn't hesitate. I couldn't carry it alone anymore. We sat in a small bar on Division Street, dim lighting, candles on the tables, low conversations humming in the background. I told her about the shampoo, cautiously, almost shamefully, as if it were a ridiculous detail. She listened, arms crossed, her expression serious. "So," she said finally, "either he's using it secretly or someone else is." I whispered, "Exactly. And you don't think it's him?" I shook my head. "He can't stand the smell. He never touched it. Never." She took a sip of wine, then set the glass down slowly. "Then you already know what that means." I was silent. A storm raged inside me, but I couldn't put it into words. "Lena," Clara said gently, "you're not looking for signs anymore. You've already found them." Her words settled heavily in my chest. Later that night, I lay in bed beside Ethan, staring into the darkness. He slept deeply, breathing evenly. I listened to the familiar sound and felt more alone than ever. The shampoo, the hair, the late nights. The pieces were forming a pattern, and for the first time, a dark, quiet decision took shape inside me. If I couldn't get the truth the easy way, I would get it myself. The thought wouldn't let me go. It followed me through the next days like a shadow, silent but persistent. I tried to distract myself with work, buried myself in layouts and color palettes, but my mind kept drifting back to the bathroom, to the shampoo bottle sitting innocently on its shelf. Every time I passed the door, my chest tightened. At night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling while Ethan slept beside me. His breathing was slow and steady, the sound so familiar it almost hurt. I wondered how many nights I had fallen asleep to that rhythm without questioning anything. Now, every breath felt like a reminder of how little I truly knew. I turned the possibilities over and over in my head. I could confront him directly. I could ask him outright if someone else had been in our house, in our bed, in our shower. But what if he denied it? What if he laughed it off, told me I was imagining things, that I was paranoid? Then I would be left with nothing but my doubts and the certainty that I would never fully trust him again. I needed clarity, not half answers, not reassurances, proof. The idea came to me suddenly, almost absurd at first, like a thought you dismiss as soon as it appears. I even let out a quiet, humorless laugh when it crossed my mind. What if someone else is using my shampoo, I thought, and I make sure it can't go unnoticed? The laughter faded quickly. The idea stayed. The next morning, after Ethan left for work, I sat at the kitchen table for a long time, my coffee growing cold in front of me. I stared at the wall, my heart racing as if I were already doing something forbidden. I told myself it was crazy, immature, dangerous. And yet, the more I tried to push the thought away, the more logical it began to feel. If someone else was really here, this would expose it. There would be no denial, no excuses. By midday, my hands were shaking slightly as I grabbed my purse and keys. I went to the drugstore on Congress Avenue, telling myself I only needed a few basics. The store was bright and ordinary, filled with people going about their day without a care in the world. I walked through the aisles, tossing toothpaste, cleaning supplies, and cotton pads into my basket, my movements automatic. Then I stopped. In front of me was the shelf with hair removal creams. My heart pounded so loudly I was sure someone could hear it. I glanced around, suddenly aware of every person nearby. A woman stood a few feet away comparing shampoos. A man examined razors with a puzzled expression. No one was paying attention to me. Still, my cheeks burned. I hesitated, my fingers hovering. "What are you doing, Lena?" I asked myself. This was crossing a line. This wasn't who I was, or at least who I thought I was. But another voice inside me answered, colder and firmer. "You already crossed the line the moment you decided to stay silent." I reached out and grabbed a tube, quickly dropping it into my basket as if it might bite me. My pulse raced all the way to the checkout. At home, I waited until the house was quiet. Ethan was in his office, the door closed, absorbed in a call. I could hear the murmur of his voice through the wall. It sounded normal, familiar. That almost made it worse. I went into the bathroom and closed the door behind me. The shampoo bottle stood on the sink, exactly where I had left it. I stared at it for a long moment, my reflection pale in the mirror. My hands felt clammy as I took the tube from my bag and twisted the cap open. A sharp chemical smell filled the air, completely different from the herbal scent I knew so well. I hesitated one last time. Then I poured. Slowly, carefully, I squeezed the cream into the bottle, watching it disappear into the dark liquid. I shook it gently, then more firmly, until the consistency looked normal again. My heart hammered in my chest, every beat loud in my ears. I wiped the sink, washed my hands, made sure nothing looked out of place. When I put the bottle back on the shelf, it looked exactly the same as always. Only I knew what was inside. I leaned against the cold tiles and took a deep breath. My reflection stared back at me, wide-eyed, shaken, and unfamiliar. I felt like I had become someone else in that small bathroom, not just a wife who suspected, but a woman who was actively setting a trap. At dinner that evening, Ethan talked about work, about a new project, about deadlines and meetings. I nodded, asked questions, even laughed at the right moments. No one would have guessed what I had done earlier that day. But inside, there was a storm. What if I'd gone too far? What if I couldn't undo this? What if the truth, once revealed, destroyed everything beyond repair? That night, I lay awake again, staring into the darkness while Ethan slept beside me. Somewhere down the hall, the shampoo bottle stood quietly on its shelf, outwardly harmless. I waited, not for him, for her. The first 2 days, nothing happened, or at least nothing I could see. I checked the shampoo bottle more often than I cared to admit. I lifted it, turned it slightly, shook it once to judge the weight. Each time, my stomach tightened. The level looked nearly the same. Maybe no one had used it. Maybe I had been wrong. Maybe I had set a trap for a ghost. But my heart still raced whenever Ethan went to shower. I'd stand in the kitchen pretending to rinse dishes or scroll through my phone while I listened to the water start. The pipes groaned softly. Steam would creep under the bathroom door. I imagined him reaching for the bottle, unscrewing the cap, lathering it into his hair. And every time the same thought cut through me. He hates the smell. He wouldn't. So I waited. Not for him, for her. My days became a kind of performance. I answered emails, worked on designs, took calls with clients. I clicked through drafts and corrected margins, but everything was mechanical. My mind kept returning to the bathroom like a compass needle, pulled by something dark and magnetic. In the evenings, Ethan sat beside me on the sofa. We watched a show, he laughed at the right moments, made popcorn, put his arm around me. Sometimes, in the warm, ordinary comfort of it, I almost believed I had made everything up, that this was just insecurity, that I had let Clara's doubts seep into my brain until I saw betrayal everywhere. But then Ethan would go to his office, and the moment I heard his door click shut, I would get up. I would walk down the hallway quietly, as if the house itself might accuse me. I'd step into the bathroom, flick on the light, and stare at the shampoo bottle like it held an answer to a question I was terrified to ask. Every night I told myself, this is the last time. I'm going to stop. I'm going to let it go. And every night I picked it up again. On the fourth day, it happened. It was afternoon. Ethan was supposedly at the office. The house was silent except for the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of a lawnmower outside. I went into the bathroom almost casually, telling myself I was only there to grab a towel. But the moment my eyes landed on the shelf, my breath caught. The shampoo bottle was visibly lighter, not by a little, not the kind of change you can argue away. It was unmistakable, 2 finger widths missing, maybe more. My faint mark on the plastic confirmed it. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen, the air thick around me. Then I reached out and lifted it. My hand shook. Someone had used it. Someone had been here. My legs felt weak. I sat down on the edge of the bathtub, gripping the bottle like it might slip from my fingers. My mouth went dry. The light buzzed overhead, harsh and unforgiving. I stared at the dark liquid inside, at the ordinary label, at how normal it looked. And yet, it wasn't normal. My stomach twisted as excitement and nausea tangled together. This wasn't a vague feeling anymore, not an anxious hunch, not a single blonde hair I could try to explain away. This was concrete. She had been in my bathroom, under my water, touching my things. And now she had used it. My trap. I set the bottle down with trembling hands, as if it might explode. For a few seconds, all I could hear was my own breathing, fast, shallow, panicked. I pressed my palms to my face. "What did you do, Lena?" The question hit me hard, because now it wasn't just about Ethan, it wasn't just about betrayal, it was about me, about what I had become in the pursuit of the truth. That night, I could barely eat. Ethan talked about his day, complained about traffic, made a joke about some producer who couldn't make up their mind. I nodded, smiled, let out small sounds at the right time. But I couldn't stop thinking about the bottle. I couldn't stop imagining it. A woman in my shower, humming, relaxed, completely at home in a space that should have been mine alone. Her hand squeezing my shampoo into her palm without hesitation, without guilt. And later, when Ethan went to bed, I stayed up a little longer. I sat in the dark living room, the television off, the house quiet. My heart was still pounding, because now it was only a matter of time before something happened, before the truth stepped fully into the light, and I didn't know if I was ready for what I had set in motion. It started with what felt like a coincidence. Or maybe it wasn't a coincidence at all. Maybe it was the universe deciding that I had waited long enough. It was a Thursday evening. The sky outside was already dark, even though it wasn't late yet. I had the television on in the background while I worked on my laptop at the dining table, tweaking a client presentation I'd revised 3 times already without really seeing it. Ethan was once again not at home. A long production meeting, he had said. I had stopped asking for details. The news was on, the familiar voices of anchors blending into meaningless noise. I wasn't paying attention until a name suddenly cut through my thoughts like a blade. Olivia Brooks. My fingers froze above the keyboard. I looked up slowly, my heart beginning to race before I even understood why. There she was on the screen. Olivia Brooks. Actress, blonde, flawless, one of those faces everyone in America seemed to recognize. Camera flashes burst around her as she stood in front of a premiere theater in Los Angeles. But something was wrong. Horribly wrong. Her head was bald. Not short, not styled, completely bald. Smooth, pale skin gleaming under the harsh lights. She wore a scarf loosely around her neck, tugging at it as if it wished it would climb up and hide her scalp. Her eyes darted nervously as reporters shouted questions. I felt the air leave my lungs. The news was on. The anchors spoke excitedly, voices buzzing with speculation. A mysterious incident, a shocking transformation, rumors swirling behind the scenes of her latest film. Olivia Brooks avoided every question, her lips pressed into a tight line as she hurried past the cameras. My laptop slid shut without me realizing it. A thought formed in my mind so sudden and so sharp that it made me feel dizzy. The shampoo. I couldn't look away. My pulse thundered in my ears as the screen showed her again, closer this time. The curve of her skull, the absence of even the smallest strand of hair. In that moment, everything clicked into place. She had been here. She had stood in my bathroom, under my shower, using my shampoo as if it belonged to her. A sound escaped my throat, something between a laugh and a sob. I pressed my hand over my mouth, my whole body trembling. The trap I had set, the one I wasn't even sure I wanted to work, had snapped shut with brutal precision. The truth was right there on the screen, broadcast to millions, and only I knew what had caused it. The following days were a blur of headlines. Olivia Brooks shocks fans with sudden hair loss. Illness, artistic statement, or sabotage. Insiders speak of a mysterious incident on set. Her face was everywhere, on news sites, in newspapers, on social media, photos of her in scarves, in wigs, with her head bowed, shielding herself from the cameras. I watched it all in silence. Ethan said nothing. When he came home that night, he seemed different, tense, distracted. He avoided my eyes, moved through the house restlessly, as if he didn't quite belong in his own skin. His phone buzzed often. He stepped outside to take calls, lowering his voice. I observed him quietly, my emotions tangled and overwhelming. There it was: guilt, recognition, fear. A few evenings later, we sat in the living room, the news playing softly in the background. Olivia's image appeared again, the same footage looping endlessly. Crazy, isn't it? All her hair gone so suddenly. Ethan stiffened almost imperceptibly. "Yeah," he muttered, reaching for his glass. "Terrible." "Do you think she—" I let the sentence trail off. "I don't know," he said quickly. "I barely know her." Barely. The word echoed in my head like a lie screaming to be exposed. I nodded and said nothing, but inside, something hardened. A quiet resolve took shape, cold and steady. He wasn't going to tell me. Not now, maybe not ever. And that meant the silence between us wasn't just painful anymore. It was unbearable. The silence in our house grew heavier with each passing day. It wasn't the comfortable silence of routine or shared understanding. It was sharp, loaded, pressing in from all sides. Every room felt smaller. Every conversation felt staged, as if we were both reading from scripts we no longer believed in. Ethan moved through the house like a guest. He stayed longer in his office, closed the door more often, took calls in hushed tones. When we crossed paths, his eyes slid away from mine too quickly. He talked about work endlessly, filling the air with meaningless details, as if words alone could keep the truth from surfacing. But the truth was already there. It sat between us at the breakfast table. It lay with us in bed at night. It stared at us from the television screen. On Sunday morning, I retrieved the newspaper from the mailbox. The paper felt heavier than usual in my hands. When I unfolded it at the kitchen table, my breath caught. Olivia Brooks was on the front page again. This time, it wasn't a tabloid. It was a serious paper. The headline was restrained, almost respectful, but the implication was clear. Hollywood star faces mysterious set scandal after sudden hair loss. I placed the newspaper carefully on the table, right between our coffee cups. Ethan came in a moment later. He poured himself coffee, moving automatically, then froze when he noticed the headline. His hand tightened around the mug. For a brief second, his face betrayed him, a flicker of panic, recognition, something dangerously close to fear. "Don't you know her too?" I asked lightly, as if I were just making conversation. He cleared his throat. "From the set," he said vaguely. "She's complicated." "I see." I nodded and took a slow sip of coffee. The silence stretched, thick, suffocating. Inside me, two voices battled each other. One whispered that I had already won, that the truth was exposed whether he admitted it or not. The other screamed that this half-truth, this cowardly silence was worse than any confession. I couldn't live like this. That evening, Ethan sat in the living room with a glass of red wine, flipping through a script without really reading it. The lamp cast a soft glow over him, making him look almost peaceful, almost like the man I had once trusted with my entire life. I stood in the doorway, my heart pounding. "We need to talk," I said. He looked up, irritation flickering across his face. "Lena, please, not now. I'm exhausted." "No," I replied, my voice shaking but firm. "Now." Slowly, he set the script aside. "What's wrong?" I sat down across from him, my hands clenched in my lap. "For weeks, something has been wrong between us. You've been distant, secretive." I swallowed hard, and then I found blonde hair in our shower. His face went still. "Ava," he began, then stopped himself. "Lena, it's not what you think." I laughed, short and bitter. "Don't do that. Don't insult me." I reached for the newspaper on the coffee table and pushed it toward him. Olivia Brooks stared up at us from the page. "Say it," I demanded. "Just once, be honest." Ethan lowered his head, rubbing his hands over his face. The room was painfully quiet. Then, barely audible, he said, "It happened." The words hit me like a blow. "How long?" I asked. He didn't answer. "How long?" I repeated, louder this time. He looked at me, eyes shining with guilt. "A few months." A laugh tore out of me, raw and broken. "A few months," I echoed, "while she stood in my shower, while she used my things, while you came home and kissed me like nothing was wrong." He stood up, reaching for me. "Lena, please, don't touch me." 16 years crashed down on me all at once. 16 years of trust, of shared history, of believing we were something unbreakable. And in that moment, I knew, whatever we had been, it was gone. The fight that followed had been building for weeks, maybe even years. Now it poured out of us without restraint, ugly and relentless. Ethan tried to explain. He said it hadn't been planned, that it started as something meaningless, something that was never supposed to matter. He said he had felt lonely, pressured, flattered. Each word landed like another betrayal. "A mistake?" I repeated, my voice shaking. "You don't lie for months by mistake. You don't bring another woman into our home by mistake." He ran a hand through his hair, pacing the room. "I never wanted to hurt you." I laughed bitterly. "But you did, every single day." At some point, I started crying. Not quiet tears, but deep, wrenching sobs that came from a place I hadn't known existed. 16 years unraveled in front of me. Memories of our wedding day, our first apartment, lazy Sundays, shared dreams that now felt like someone else's life. He cried too, said my name over and over, apologized until the words lost all meaning. By the time the argument burned itself out, there was nothing left but exhaustion and silence. The next morning, I woke up with a dull ache behind my eyes and a strange clarity in my chest. Ethan was already gone. A note sat on the kitchen counter. "I'm staying at a hotel for a few days. I'm sorry. I'll give you space." I stared at the paper for a long time, then folded it and placed it in a drawer. It felt symbolic, putting him away, at least for now. That afternoon, I walked into a law firm downtown. The office was quiet, neutral, almost comforting in its lack of emotion. The lawyer listened as I spoke, nodding calmly. "We can file for divorce," she said matter-of-factly, "and if the media becomes involved, we can help you manage that as well." I surprised myself by saying, "I want the truth out." On the way home, I cried on the subway, silent tears slipping down my cheeks as strangers stood inches away from me, unaware that my life had just split in two. The days that followed moved quickly. Papers were filed, calls were made. My name appeared where I never expected it to: online articles, gossip columns, whispers at cafes. Olivia Brooks faded from the headlines, replaced by speculation about Ethan, about me, about what had really happened. 2 days before the article was published, I met Noah Reed. He wasn't what I had expected. He didn't rush me, he didn't push, he listened. We sat in a quiet cafe, his notepad closed for most of the conversation. I told him everything: the hair, the shampoo, the suspicion, the moment I knew. My voice broke more than once. Each time, he waited. "If this comes out," he said gently, "you need to be ready. People will judge you. Some will support you, some won't." "I'm ready," I said, surprising myself how steady my voice sounded. "I'm done being silent." When the article was published, it exploded. My phone buzzed constantly: messages from strangers, from old friends, from people who saw themselves in my story. Some praised me for my courage, others accused me of cruelty. I read everything. And then I put my phone down. That night, I stood alone in the bathroom, staring at my reflection. I looked older, tired, but also stronger. For the first time in a long while, I felt like my life belonged to me again. The aftermath settled slowly, like dust after a collapse. The article was everywhere. My name, Lena Hart, printed in bold letters, attached to a story I had lived but never imagined would belong to the public. Headlines debated guilt, morality, betrayal. Comment sections overflowed with strangers dissecting my marriage as if it were fiction. At first, it was overwhelming. I noticed the looks when I walked into cafes, the half-second pauses in conversation when people recognized me. Some smiled with sympathy, others stared too long. A few whispered. I learned quickly that being visible was both empowering and exhausting. Ethan tried to call. I didn't answer. He sent messages, long ones at first, then shorter, more desperate ones. Apologies, regrets, promises to explain everything properly, to fix things somehow. I read them once, then stopped. There was nothing left to explain. Understanding wouldn't bring back what had been broken. The divorce process moved forward with quiet efficiency. Paperwork, dates, neutral language that reduced 16 years of life to assets and signatures. It hurts, but it was a clean kind of pain, honest, unlike the months of doubt that had come before. One evening, my phone rang. It was Noah. "I just wanted to check on you," he said. No recorder, no professional tone, just concern. We met a few days later, not as journalist and subject, but as two people sitting across from each other with coffee growing cold between them. We talked about small things at first: music, the city, the strange unreality of seeing your own life reflected in headlines. Then I said quietly, "Sometimes I'm afraid I won't be able to trust anyone again." He didn't rush to reassure me. He just nodded. "That makes sense," he said. "Trust isn't something you force. It's something you rebuild slowly, or not at all, and both are okay." Something in his words loosened inside me. Weeks passed. The noise around the story gradually faded. New scandals replaced mine. Olivia Brooks disappeared from the news cycle. Ethan became a name I rarely heard, and when I did, it no longer felt like a wound being reopened, just a distant ache. I started reclaiming my life in small ways: morning walks without checking my phone, rearranging the house so it felt like mine again, throwing away the shampoo bottle that had started it all. One evening, standing in front of the mirror, I caught my own reflection and paused. I looked different, not happier exactly, but clearer. less afraid of what I might find if I looked too closely. I whispered to myself, "You survived." And for the first time, I truly believed it. Several months passed, and with them, something unexpected returned to my life. Peace. Not the loud, triumphant kind people talk about after surviving something terrible. It was quieter than that. Softer. It came in small moments, waking up without a knot in my stomach, making coffee without replaying old conversations, falling asleep without wondering where Ethan was or who he was with. The divorce was finalized on a gray Tuesday morning. No courtroom drama, no tears, just a letter from the court, a stack of papers that officially ended 16 years of marriage. I sat at the kitchen table holding it, feeling strangely calm. I cried, yes, but it wasn't the kind of crying that breaks you. It was a release, a letting go. Ethan disappeared from my daily life like a shadow at dusk. Sometimes I saw his name attached to projects online, premieres, the same world that had once connected us. But it no longer felt personal. He belonged to my past now, and for the first time, that felt right. I rarely heard about Olivia Brooks anymore. When I did, I felt nothing. No anger, no satisfaction, no bitterness, just distance. Whatever had happened between her and Ethan no longer defined me. What defined me now were the choices I made for myself. I continued seeing Noah, carefully, slowly, without labels. Sometimes it was just coffee, sometimes a walk through Zilker Park, the river catching the light as the sun went down. Other times we sat in comfortable silence, watching a movie neither of us paid much attention to. There was no pressure, no promises, and that was exactly what I needed. One evening, alone on my balcony, wrapped in a blanket with a glass of wine in my hand, I watched the city settle into night. The air was warm, the sky glowed pink and gold. I thought about the woman I had been at 19, hopeful, certain, unaware of how fragile certainty can be. I thought about the woman who had found a single blonde hair in her shower and felt her world begin to crack. And I thought about who I was now. Someone who had stopped staying silent. Someone who had chosen truth over comfort. Someone who had learned that endings, as painful as they are, can also be beginnings. I didn't know where my path with Noah would lead. Maybe nowhere, maybe somewhere unexpected. For the first time in years, I didn't need to know. I stood in front of the bathroom mirror later that night, looked at my own reflection, my dark hair, my tired but steady eyes, and said quietly, "I am no longer the woman who waits." And I meant it, because silence had once almost destroyed me. But the truth, however painful, had set me free.